Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Walter Bosley channel for this very special NYMZA tie-in episode. Now, this is going to be a short one because we want to get right to the point, and the point is Charles Dellschau and his art. So I want to thank everybody who's in the live chat for being here today. And those of you who will be watching it afterwards, or maybe are watching it but are not in the live chat, welcome. If you're new here to the Walter Bosley channel, a big welcome, and we hope you come back. Now, remember, real quick, NYMZA happens October 11th through the 13th. That's coming up, okay? It starts a week from this Friday, October 11th through 13th. You can get your tickets at walterbosley.com. Now, also, this week's live stream, which usually is on Wednesday, is moved to Thursday. So it's going to be Thursday, and it's Todd Wood with a special California interview. And so it'll be at the later California time, but I'll put an announcement out. My guest for this special segment is a gentleman that I met years ago when I was first digging into, or I should say learning about the Sonora Aero Club Charles Dellschau mystery. Now, there were people who came before me, Dennis Crenshaw, Theo Pyman, Michael Busby, Stephen Romano, our guest today, was one of those people, and several others who I learned the fascinating details and story about this man, Charles Dellschau, who came from Germany, sent to California to observe and report on the activities of the mysterious Sonora Aero Club, who were allegedly in the 1850s, the decade before our Civil War. Folks, this is the mid-19th century. Okay, this is decades before, a half a decade before the Wright brothers. Okay, these guys, the Sonora Aero Club, were allegedly building flying machines and demonstrating them for people up in Tuolumne County. Now, that's, of course, the reason we have NYMZA. The mysterious group that Dellschau was reporting to was called NYMZA. And so we're celebrating Dellschau, we're celebrating his art, the story that he was conveying in his art, and of course the mystery of NYMZA. That's why we hold NYMZA up in Sonora, California, and it's going to be fantastic. You guys have been hearing me talk about it. I'm going to keep talking about it. I, of course, have written about the Sonora Aero Club and Dellschau in my book, Origin, as well as Empire of the Wheel 2, Friends from Sonora. But right here is some of Dellschau's art. And on the back here, this is the man we're going to be talking about today, Charles Dellschau. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on our guest, who is Stephen Romano of the Romano Art Gallery. And Stephen published what is probably, his gallery put out what is probably the finest, best quality book on the art of Charles Dellschau ever published. So there were several authors and artists who contributed to the book, but let's bring on Stephen. So Stephen Romano, welcome to the Walter Bosley channel at last.
Thank you.
How you doing today?
Oh, we're doing all right, hanging in there.
Despite good.
Despite these ever bewildering times, we're always grateful for our blessings, and hopefully that's light we see at the end of the tunnel, not another train. So
absolutely,
it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I feel very honored.
So tell us how you learned about Dellschau and how that beautiful book that your gallery put out, how that came about, how that happened.
Well, here's the book. It's 6 pounds. It's was a labor of love for 2 years of my life. Took every minute and every red cent I had to produce it, and you know, it's really considered to be one of the gold standards in terms of monographs for an outsider artist, and I'm very proud of that accomplishment. I hope when they write my obituary that they make mention of this. But and we had, you know, some of the really great authors of our time writing this book, and it was the first time that the work of Charles Dellschau was shown chronologically, and it was also the first time that his early His early diary drawings. Whoops, I'm going backwards here. His early diary drawings were shown to the public, and I had to do some extensive research to actually find them, and found them the day before we were about to go to press. So it was just, it was an adventure. But yeah, it's a beautiful book. I used to have many of them. I think I have maybe 8 or 9 of them left, but you can get it on eBay. I sell them pretty cheaply on eBay. I've seen them sell for $3,000. This book.
Oh yeah, I'm telling you, you very generously gifted me with a copy, which I apologize for not having it here, but I'm at my home studio, and the book is over at the office with Malia.
One of the great accomplishments, having done the book, was probably the greatest art writer of our time, Thomas McEvely, who was the former editor of Art Forum, and he worked at Rice University as a cultural anthropologist. He was his last published essay, actually, before he passed away. So and he was a giant in the field of both cultural anthropology and art criticism. So that was really great to have it. And the person who coined, they say, the term outsider art, the late Roger Cardinal, also one of his last published essays, was in this book as well. So, it stands as a monument to the integrity of Dellschau's art, and, puts the integrity of him as an artist in the forefront. So we're very pleased with that. But do you want me to go into a quick biography of Dellschau, or to give it?
Oh, absolutely.
So he was born in, I'll go through this quickly because it's information that's readily available elsewhere. You can go to my website, of course, charlesdellschau.com, right? And there's a timeline there that explains things and explains his life in context to the technological and cultural advancements that were happening at the time. But I'll just talk about him specifically. He was born in 1830 in Berlin. And his father was a butcher, okay? And his father's brother was a successful academic, because their parents, Dellschau's grandparents, were very well-to-do. They were steel barons, and they, in fact, built the very first steel armatures for Baron von Zeppelin's trial Zeppelins, right? So because Dellschau's father wasn't academically gifted, he kind of sank in social stature. Important to this story, okay? So then Dellschau, kind of always yearned to gain some of that notoriety back. That's, social recognition and notoriety back. So around when he was 18 or so, he took off on a boat trip to the United States to gain more economic prosperity. And he arrived, we believe it was we're sure it was in the port of Galveston, and drifted for a while, and then settled in Houston eventually. But in the process, married a woman who had a child who died, and the child died. So there's, he's already carrying around, a considerable amount of grief, right? Married someone else, had 3 kids, 2 of them died. The wife died again. Again, his need for catharsis is already, developing within his breastbone, he was a little guy, apparently, right? He wasn't like a big man. He's like, how do you say, yeah, he's modest in his physical appearance or his physical presence, right? So one of his nieces or daughters or something married into the Stelzig family in Houston, which, at the time they were leather barons, right? They made like the really high-end leather goods, right? So they gave him a room in the back. He went to live with her, right? They gave him a room in the back of their house, like a utility room. And he stayed there for almost 30 years doing nothing but making drawings, right? And they would bring him art supplies and that and whatever, right? So after he died, maybe about 20 years later, they didn't move any of the stuff, right? But about 20 years later, they moved all the shit up into the attic on top of the garage, right? And there was a fire that broke up in the house next door, right? So the fire department came and they peered in through the window and they saw this mess in the garage, right? So they went over and they said, hey, look, you got to clean that mess up. That's a real serious fire hazard. So all of his stuff was unceremoniously taken from the attic to the sidewalk. The garbage truck picked it up and brought it to the dump in Houston, right? So we're at the dump in Houston, and this garbage truck is unloading all this stuff, right? And this picker, you all know what a picker is, right? Someone who finds like, trash tables and stuff and refinishes them and sells them as antiques. This picker noticed these big notebooks coming off the truck, and they seemed to have like drawings and stuff, and rushed over and rescued them, right? 12 of these giant notebooks. And here, I'll show you a picture of what they look like, so we don't have to leave it to the imagination. This is a pretty important part of the story, actually. Here, hang on. Just give me 1 second. Okay, yeah. So here's a picture of what these books look like. Okay? Imagine these, not the ones on the top, but these ones here. Imagine these falling off the truck, right? So the picker goes and runs and gets them and walks back to his truck. But then another picker saw him, and he was actually eyeing these books too, and went up to him and said, "Hey, what you got there, And he said, "Oh, I got these sketchbooks." Okay, well, I'll give you $100 for them, right? Which was a lot of money at that time, right? So yeah, he bought them. This guy's name was Fred Washington, right? He brought them back to his trading post, right? He didn't really know what to do with them. So he just kind of put them in a pile and threw a tarp over them, right? A few years later, in wanders this woman who was an intern at the Menil collection. And she's curating a show, helping curate a show on the theme of flight. And she says, "Well, do you have anything on flight?" And he goes, "Yeah, I have these books." She starts looking at them, and wow, these are really great. So thus begins the odyssey of Charles Dellschau's art. From the time he made it in his utility room to the time it went up to the attic in complete darkness, no one even knew they were up there, really. That was the only time, all the books were together, really, was when they were up in the attic, to their odyssey, to the dump, to Fred Washington's place, and then to the Menil collection, right, which is one of the most prestigious collections in America, right? So what he did, apparently now, once they started looking at this art, right, this art was all about this narrative of this, what do you want to call them, like a collective or a fraternity of men who called themselves the Sonora Aero Club, and they purportedly met. They're out in the Sonora Desert on the occasion or for the conquest of the gold rush, right? And they apparently all stayed in the same boarding house, right? And they formed this drinking club, basically, right? They would meet every Friday night, and according to Dellschau, well, in Dellschau's words, they would flap their jaws until they were tired, and they would make proposals for these airships, and each one of the member, whatever the airship they described, they would ascribe their name to the airship in general, right? So Dellschau's work was in large part a record of the activities of the Sonora Aero Club, of which he was a purported member. Dellschau's writings describe the club as a secret group of flight enthusiasts who met at a Sonora, California boarding house in the mid-19th century. The dates are approximately 1853 to 1858 that this group was supposedly active, right? So one of the members, whose name actually was Peter Menace, right? He had discovered the formula for an anti-gravity fuel, which they called NB gas, or also called SUPA, which is a German word for mixture, right? Their mission was to design, and we speculate that they might have also tried to build the very first navigatable aircraft. And their purpose was, their covert purpose was to build these navigatable aircrafts so that they could cross the plains, right, to avoid the conflicts with the natives, the Indians, and the white men, to get to the location of where the gold rush was taking place, where the mining was taking place. So their mission was to design these and build these navigatable aircrafts using the NB gas for lift and propulsion. Dellschau called these aircrafts Aeros, A-E-R-O-S, right? So he didn't claim to be a pilot of the airships. He identified himself only as the draftsman for the Sonora Aero Club. So his collages, his art, right, which I'm going to show you a number of these, but I'll just pull this one out as an example here. Hang on. Yeah, here's a good one here, right? His art incorporated clippings, right, that were happening not in the time of the Aero Club, but in the time that he set out to start recording the activities or start making the drawings. So the very first drawing he would have made is this one. I happen to have it in a frame here, right? This is the very first drawing Dellschau ever made, right? And what it was is that there was a letter to the editor. Let me see if I can find that. Hang on. Yeah, there was a letter to the editor in the Houston Daily by this guy. This is the letter here, right? By this guy, W.N. Brown. And he proposed that jet propulsion was the wave of the future, right? And so Dellschau wrote kind of a rebuttal to it all. And that's kind of the seed of where all of Dellschau's art begins, right? Is that he had, so that, and in order to make his, position emphatic, he made this entire body of work over I guess it would be a 23-year period. Yeah, he started in 1898. That drawing I just showed you was made in 1898. And his last drawings were in 1921. So it's absolutely amazing. And now, okay, so around 1995, 1996, his work started to enter into the mainstream art world. Well, not the mainstream art world, actually. It's called the outsider art world, right? They were discovered by this man named Pete Navarro. He had actually gone to Fred Washington's trading post because he had seen some of the Dellschaus exhibited at the Menil collection and wanted to know all about them, right? So he went to the trade. He found out where they got them from, and he went to the trading post and began a dialogue with Fred Washington. He was going in there sketching them every day, sketching the Dellschaus, and yearned to own them, but they were too expensive for him at the time. But he eventually did acquire them all, and for 20 years, Pete Navarro, who you mentioned earlier, Dennis Crenshaw, he was Dennis Crenshaw's collaborator on that book, The Secrets of Dellschau. And just recently, within the last maybe 2 or 3 months, we found the manuscript for a book that Pete Navarro wanted to write and publish. So maybe that's coming down the pike, right? So what else can I say? Once the work started entering the Menil collection, and then this gallery that I managed for a few years called the Rico Moresca Gallery, which is, the premier gallery in terms of so-called outsider art. They acquired some of the Dellschaus, and they were the ones that really perpetuated it and made the first catalog on Dellschau, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Mm-hmm. And then this came out shortly after, the magazine Grand Street, which is, I think, a Soho publication. Yeah, one of the conservators from the Menil collection made a beautiful article about Dellschau in this book too. So these are very early sightings. Dellschau was in a show at the Baltimore Visionary Art Museum. Mm-hmm. There's another one there. Good. Those are very early ones. So what happened was Pete Navarro sold all of the very early Dellschaus after owning them for about 20 years, sold some to the San Antonio Art Association, which later split off and became the Whitty Museum and the San Antonio Museum of Fine Art. The Menil has a number of very early works as well. So what was generally put out by the time Dellschau was shown at things, it had actually, Dellschau has only ever had, I think, 2 or 3 solo exhibitions of his work, maybe 3 solo exhibitions. It's kind of hard to believe. The first one was about 75 years after he had passed away. So just very interesting. So then when I became a private art dealer, I acquired all the works from Rico Moresca and have been perpetuating them since. And I've done a solo show in my gallery and whatever. But this is the big thing, the Dellschau book that I did. It's like I think the thing that's most, most worthy of his legacy as a great visionary artist. I don't really consider Dellschau so much an outsider artist, right? But then there's this. Hang on a second. There's this. There was an exhibition at the American Folk Art Museum a few years ago that featured Charles Dellschau, and they published another essay that I had commissioned Thomas McEvely to write. Yeah, it was really great. They really gave Dellschau his day in the sun on that one. And they showed some of the known complete books that are still intact in that exhibition. And then this is a gem. This is a book about Texas, outsider art in Texas by, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Jay Wenner, who's a friend of mine, and he has Dellschau on the cover. And just absolutely, I think, one of the best essays on the artist. The author Jay Wenner really penetrated the work. And you say, it says here, Dellschau's work and the work of Dellschau, displacement, loss, seclusion, and deep isolation. His epic creations was a private endeavor that was manifested in the confines of his imagination and his solitary room, which you can't get better. You can't get a better description than that. So do you want to see some of the works, or do you have any questions?
Yeah, let's because I'll tell you, folks, Stephen has. I mean, you see the book that his gallery put out. Stephen's got a fantastic collection. And there we go. There's one of.
This is one of my favorite, and this one's actually traveled quite a bit. It was in a show about, I can't remember it was in a show about outsider artists in Paris a couple of years ago. But this is really beautiful. This one is like, it shows. So this is the arrow here, right? The aeronautical device in it. These things are called fall ease. They're in an upward. You see the pencil line here? They're in an upward position when the craft is landing, and they're folded down when the thing is rising. So here's like the balloon element of it, right? And these are rotating motors here. Okay, so what they would do is they would have the motors rotate at an accelerant speed, and then they would take that substance, that anti-gravity substance that we talked about before, the NB gas, no, the SUPA, right? And they would put like just a drop or two on there, right? So the how do you call it? The cataclysmic reaction, or the chemical reaction, would turn that liquid into an anti-gravity substance, or an anti-gravity air, which would fill the balloons, right? Yeah. So that's really beautiful, right? So there was only one person who knew the formula for the substance. That would have been Peter Menace, who I was talking about before, because he thought everybody else in the Sonora Aero Club were hotheads, right? And they would put like a whole bunch of the gallons of it on the thing, right? Because they didn't have the patience to wait for it by just putting a drop or two, and it would cause this cataclysmic explosion, right?
There's the Stephen. There's the Dellschau's drawings of that spinning, rotating element. Now, I don't know if you recall this, but it was looking through your book, and I contacted you and Joseph Farrell first about this, but it was looking through your book that I realized, my God, they were using the basic prototype of the bell, what the Nazis would use in the 20th century. Here it was in the 1850s with the spin, the bell shape. There it was, folks, the whole thing. And over here, above my fingers here, is the spinning drum aspect element of the aero motors. But right there is the bell. And we were able to, that, to me, that proves that there was a century of development, German development of the bell, and we can trace it to the Sonora Aero Club through Charles Dellschau's drawings.
Some of the Sonora Aero Club members had German-sounding names. I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, Dennis and Pete, Dellschau wrote in code. I don't have any of the code here with me because those are all in the early works, pre-World War I, right?
Right.
So, Pete Navarro's brother was a code breaker, apparently, right? And he reportedly broke the code. I believe it, because you can actually ascribe some of the translation. You can actually.
Well, you let me have a brief glimpse of some of the diary pages, Dellschau's actual diary, and it was just wow. To get to see that was amazing.
Did you see that little piece of code there at the bottom?
Yeah.
No, hang on.
Yes.
Did you see it?
Yeah. Let me keep.
So Pete Navarro had broken. Hang on, Pete Navarro had broken the code, right? And where was I going with this? Hang on a second. Yeah, so in all of the early works, here's the connection, right? In all of the early works, you see that code up there? It says DM equals XO.
Mm-hmm.
You see
Yes,
that?
of course.
Yeah, okay, so many of the early works have that piece of code on the top, front and center in the drawings, right? And Pete and his brother had deciphered that into saying NYMZA, right? Which is pretty interesting, right? Now I kind of have a different theory. I think that says Dellschau. I think the B and then the E is the M on its side is an E, and then the two L's, and then show in Greek, XO is show, right? So I think that says Dellschau. But having said that, purportedly NYMZA, which is, I mean, you would be able to extrapolate what that's all about way better than I could, but apparently NYMZA was the New York branch of a German secret society that actually funded the Sonora Aero Club. So who knows, right? But there are a lot of really interesting connections that are more than just coincidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing of it is here now, okay? We look at this and we ask ourselves, well, did Dellschau ever really go to California? It's kind of hard to imagine that he actually. Here's another one here. I'll just kind of hold them up and show them to you as I go along here, right? Just absolutely beautiful. But we don't know if Dellschau ever actually went to California. There are some people, even in my field.
I think we do know. I think we do know through his drawings, because Sesharia and I have found specific places in his drawings.
Right, but it could be that he just knew somebody, right?
Could be.
Because there's absolutely, despite exhaustive research, there's absolutely no proof that any of these people ever actually existed.
Wait a minute. Actually, there is. Newell, his family remained in the area, and there's his family in the cemeteries there, and a couple of the other names. Yeah, so there is evidence there when one looks close enough. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. That's cool. Yeah, nice.
Some of them are on thick, the kind of paper that they would have used in the saddlery, in the Stelzig saddlery, to cut out, the designs, to use as templates, I should say. And then some of them are more fragile, right?
Right. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go. Which one is that?
The 4,789th one. It's a Sonora. See there?
Now these, what you're showing us, are originals, correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the somebody in the live chat was asking, folks, these are original Dellschaus. And Stephen, we're getting close to the end of our time. Now, in your opinion, now you said earlier that he was a little bit, not exactly an outsider artist, but in your opinion, was he telling a true story, or do you think it was something he heard from someone else or made up?
No, I don't think he. I think at the particularly at the turn of the century, there was this thing, in the penny papers, right, where they would make ciphers. They would make, these kind of like release them in chapters, over a period of several weeks, and they were like mystery stories, or they were, stories about the supernatural or science fiction, or just things that would, inspire the imagination and get the reader addicted, right? I think this was his version of doing one of those, right? In the beginning. Well, in the beginning, he was talking about, perpetuating the idea of anti-gravity being the prophecy of flight, of the future of flight, right? But then he started to build a story. It wasn't necessarily narrative in the overt sense, right? The early The early diaries that I showed you, those are more narrative. But then later, his work became more about painting, right? Because if you make painting every day, and he made these at the rate of one a day, right? If you make painting every day, you're bound to have some kind of stylistic affinity that develops, right? It's only natural. So this one's one of my favorites here. Y'all can see that, and then look, see.
Yeah, that's a great one too.
Look who's driving the clown of death.
Yeah, that's great stuff. That is great stuff. So, hey,
So,
you know, we got some.
What do I say? You know, I say that you know it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, you can still enjoy.
You may disagree, but I don't know that there's enough, you know, quantifiable proof that he was ever actually there, considering the volume of information that's in there that can't really be substantiated. Okay, you know, you say this one person was there, but he may have gleaned that, and we've always thought that he may have gleaned all this information from somebody else that he knew in Houston. There's actually apparently only one person that ever saw the work, someone named William. He talks about that he showed the work to, right? This is one you'll find interesting. I must show you this one while I have you here.
Okay.
Who's that?
Oh wow, look at that.
Who is that?
Let me hold on. Keep it up there.
That's Charles Tort. Or sorry, Charles Fort. 14 times?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, but they made a typo. They call him Tort. See?
Interesting.
That is Charles Fort because I looked up the picture. And then this is the only Dellschau that even remotely overtly refers to UFOs, which I find really interesting, right?
Interesting that he, you know, was clearly aware, a reader of, at least aware of Charles Fort, you know, and who he was. So, you know, that's and you're right, we cannot prove yet, but it's been a lot of fun gathering the evidence that is building to make the argument that he really did, you know, come to California. But yeah, this is fantastic. Well, you know,
says a dream on it.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, we're hoping we can get you out to bring you out to NYMZACon next year, 2025, and you can present some of these great works and, you know, talk again about Charles Dellschau to our conference audience. So we'll be talking about that with you, hopefully. And
thanks for having me.
Well, hey, again, thank you for taking your time and showing us these folks. You were looking at Dellschau originals. All right. This is quite a collection. And folks, if you can get your hands on that book, it's a beautiful volume. It really is. And Stephen, I want to thank you again for coming on and giving us your time and pulling out the drawings. And we'll have you on, you know, for a longer show and a longer discussion.
Once a week.
Hey, you know, there's so much, you know, that Dellschau inspires in the discussion and his works that we could almost do that. So we will have you back on here at the Walter Bosley channel soon. So anyway, folks,
if anybody has any questions, or you know, they can just email me.
Yeah, we got time for a question of Stephen, but in the meantime, tell us where they can find you and your work and you know, whatever it is you want them to find.
You can go to my website, romanoart.com. Usually I'm posting there. I'm just, you know, presently I'm I'm producing an exhibition for the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles, which Manly Hall founded in the 1930s. But we're doing an exhibition of an artist, Bert Schonberg, who was quite a fascinating story about that artist. But this will be the first exhibition of his art in Los Angeles in 55 years. He was a favorite of Roger Corman's. Roger Corman used his art in the Rise and Fall of the House of Usher and Premature Burial, those two movies. He was Marjorie Cameron's partner after Jack Parsons blew himself up, and I was interested in the OTO, somewhat, and but there was a strong occult side to this.
That right there sounds like maybe our next show when we have you on for the full show.
He was one of Oscar Janiger's patients who, did the early experimentations of artists on LSD. So, Bert Schomburg's art really is all about that. And
excellent.
Yeah.
I think that's what we'll talk about when I have you on for a full episode.
That show will be opening October 24th, and they're doing a beautiful catalog. Only the second catalog ever devoted to this artist, although there's a really great book by an author, Spencer Kanza, who also wrote a really great book on Marjorie Cameron, who was the Witch of LA. So yeah, we're going to be doing a Q&A or whatever, just a dialogue the night of the opening. That's free. You can go to Eventbrite. Just go to my website and follow all the links, man.
There we go, folks.
And I've been perpetuating this esoteric art since
beautiful,
something like that. So
now there we go. Perfect. Yeah, RomanoArt.com, right?
Yeah, William Mortenson's another photographic artist that I have the world's largest collection of, and Charles AA Dellschau sold a number of our works by the artist Henry Darger, and we'll talk about Henry Darger. I'm up against a hard wall here, but again, thank you. Pushing me up against it, eh? I'm milking every minute I can out of this.
I know. I'm going to talk with you in a couple days. We'll schedule for a full episode because you just mentioning a bunch of great things we need to talk about that my audience loves when we talk about Marjorie Cameron and all that. So again, Stephen, thank you so much. And we're going to have you on for absolutely a full episode. So folks, thank you, Stephen, again. Okay, folks, sorry about that. Got to run. I have a teleconference I got to do at the bottom of the hour, and I want to thank all you guys for showing up. And this was fantastic. I'm telling you, Stephen is an encyclopedia of fascinating knowledge for discussion, and I'm definitely going to have him back on for the full episode because the last names he rattled off there, it's like, okay, we got to talk about this and more Dellschau. So folks, again, thank you for showing up to this special NYMZACon related episode. And remember, to experience NYMZACon, you must attend NYMZACon. Go to the walterbosley.com/shop page. Get your NYMZACon tickets if you haven't yet. And I'll see you on Thursday night with Todd Wood. So thanks again, everybody.